The Russia-Ukraine war has many people commenting and voicing many opinions on the internet. But regardless of how you think Russia is doing, they have, in fact, not captured Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022 with confidence, swagger, and a strategic plan that looked airtight on paper. Years later, Russia has not taken Kyiv, hasn't toppled the Ukrainian government, and has paid an enormous cost in blood, money, and reputation. I am Mandatory Fun Day. This is my breakdown of some of Russia's failures in the Ukraine conflict. From logistical disasters to psychological warfare, we'll break down where the invasion unraveled and why Ukraine has endured. Make sure you stay until the end because the war isn't over, and understanding why Russia failed so far tells us a lot about how the next phase might play out. I'll also be covering the rise of drone warfare at the end of this video more in depth. And as always, I'm always open to constructive criticism and just comments in general. I want to know why you guys think Russia has failed to take Ukraine. There's a lot of people that pump Russia up online. You know, maybe there are some things I'm missing here. So tell me what you guys think. I don't think the conflict has gone the way Russia intended, but let's get into some of what I believe are the biggest failures. Number one is strategic misjudgment and underestimation. From day one, Russia miscalculated the most important factor in war, the enemy's will to fight. Russian leadership genuinely believed Ukraine would collapse in days. That wasn't arrogance, it was a deeply flawed analysis fed to the Kremlin by intelligence services eager to please. They believed Ukraine's leadership was fractured, the military was weak, and the people divided. But Ukraine responded with complete mobilization. Within days, tens of thousands of civilians volunteered for territorial defense. More joined every week. Zelensky's refusal to flee Kyiv became the symbol of resistance. And this miscalculation wasn't just political, it shaped the military plan. Russia's original invasion force was built for speed, not occupation. They aimed for a quick, decapitating strike, assuming they'd be welcome. Instead, they met Molotov cocktails in the suburbs. It literally, it looked like the old movie Project X. Did I just say old movie about one of my own favorite childhood movies? That movie, Project X, gave us a bunch of banger songs though. Heads Will Roll. I still listen to that to this day. Ukraine's national identity only strengthened under pressure. Far from dividing the country, the invasion united it in ways Putin never imagined. Russian planners assumed they could take the capital quickly and negotiate a puppet regime. Instead, they ignited a full-scale national resistance. What do you think the biggest miscalculation is in history? And is this comparable to that? Vietnam, Afghanistan? I don't know. Drop your comments, let me know what you think. I would love to start featuring the funniest comments in future videos. That would be great. I think I might add that to the end. You guys tell me where you want to add it. You can't win a modern war if your troops run out of fuel 40 miles from the front. Russia's logistical infrastructure failed before it even got started. Convoys stretched for miles on single-lane roads, completely exposed to Ukrainian ambushes. Russian troops often went without food, water, or winter gear, and when those supplies did exist, they were often stolen or sold before they reached the front lines. Here's the core problem. The Russian military looked massive on paper, but years of corruption had gutted its real readiness. Tanks were poorly maintained, soldiers weren't trained, units marked as elite had barely conducted live-fire drills in years. Perhaps even worse was the rigidity of their command structure. Orders had to go up the chain and come back down. When their plans were disrupted, field commanders couldn't adjust. That led to entire battalions stalling out under fire because they weren't allowed to improvise. Question for the viewers, is it better to have a flexible, smaller force or a massive, rigid one? Ukraine proved that quality beats quantity, but where do you stand? And where do you think the breaking point is? Is there a number of bodies that you can throw at something and it will cease being a problem? I guess is what I'm asking. The video isn't over, but I want to give a shout out to my website because it does the most for me all the time. We've got shirts, we've got hats, merchandise of all kinds, water bottles, coffee mugs. Members of my website get 20% off merch and access to exclusive content. And also, we've got a link on there to regulation compliant shirts. Let's get back to the video. Reason number 3 is Ukraine's NATO training and tactical innovation. Since the 2014 annexation of Crimea, Ukraine began a slow but deliberate transformation of its military. I don't know why that word is so hard for me to say. Please console me. They partnered with NATO nations to retrain everything. Logistics, communications, field tactics, command structure, all of it. This wasn't cosmetic. Ukraine went from a Soviet-style army to a NATO-style force in less than a decade. They prioritized non-commissioned officer corps, mission command flexibility, and real-world training alongside U.S. and British troops. When the war began, Ukraine's forces were mobile, disciplined, and decentralized, even though they were smaller. They had a smaller total force. They deployed small anti-tank teams to ambush Russian armor. They used drones for reconnaissance targeting. They moved quickly, struck hard, and faded before Russia could respond. They had a fairly effective guerrilla-style tactic. Even their use of technology was more innovative. Ukrainian drone operators used cheap commercial drones to spot and destroy expensive Russian vehicles. Their battlefield software allowed real-time targeting between infantry and artillery. Modern war favors the fast and flexible. Ukraine used smart tactics, smart weapons, and smart leadership. They didn't need to overpower Russia. They just needed to outmaneuver them, and they did. Military analysts agree Ukraine would not have survived this long without massive Western aid. And so that brings me to reason number 4 why the Russian military failed, and that reason is Western military aid and intelligence. But it's only part of the story. It's not just what they got, it's how they used it. By the end of 2024, the US and European allies had delivered over $100 billion in aid, I think. That's what the estimated amount is. But perhaps even more critical was intelligence. The US, UK, and NATO provided real-time satellite imagery, signals, intercepts, and surveillance data. Ukrainian commanders often had better battlefield awareness than their Russian counterparts. This enabled precision strikes like hitting ammo depots deep behind enemy lines or intercepting Russian movements before they happened. If you were in command, would you rather have more tanks or perfect intel? I want to know. I'm curious. I know it's kind of a random question, but let me know what you think. Ukraine shows us how devastating a smaller army can be when it knows exactly where to hit. I am also an intel guy, and so I'm kind of biased. I can acknowledge that. We're pretty great. Number 5 is the failure to achieve air superiority. One of the most unexpected failures of the Russian campaign was its inability to dominate the skies. Everyone thought Russia would sweep Ukraine's air defenses aside in the opening days. That did not happen. Ukraine's surface-to-air missile systems, including Soviet-era S-300s and modern Western systems like Iris-T and Patriot, remained operational and deadly. In fact, by early 2025, Ukraine had intercepted nearly 85% of incoming Russian missiles using a layered defense network. You want your air defenses to be like lasagna. You want them to be in a delicious, delectable layer with just better stuff the deeper you go. That was really weird. And it wasn't just defense. Ukraine used its own air power, drones, fixed-wing aircraft, and even homemade drones. I said drones twice. I know. Okay, commercial drones versus homemade drones. You guys get what I'm saying. They used this to strike oil depots, command centers, and troop barracks. Without air dominance, Russia couldn't support its ground troops. It couldn't scout ahead. It couldn't provide consistent artillery correction. That's a game changer. Russia relies heavily on artillery. That is one of the things that they are best at. They are objectively good at artillery. By mid-2023, Russia's manpower crisis became undeniable. Casualties mounted, entire brigades vanished from the map. To compensate, Russia resorted to mass conscription, pulling in older reservists, students, and even prison inmates. Wagner Group mercenaries led many offensives but suffered catastrophic losses, sometimes up to 80% casualty rates in certain battles. When Wagner fractured due to the death of a leader, Russia lost its most aggressive shock troops. Compare that to Ukraine. Even after 3 years of war, morale remains high. Soldiers rotate, rest, and rearm. Civilian support is strong. Most importantly, they know exactly what they're fighting for. Survival. And that is kind of all it takes sometimes. Russian troops, by contrast, often don't understand their objectives. Many were told they were on training missions or peacekeeping operations. Intercepted calls reveal soldiers begging to go home, refusing orders, or surrendering en masse. You can't win a war when your troops don't want to be there. Morale isn't a soft factor, it's a battlefield multiplier. From day one, Ukraine has controlled the narrative. They've been highly effective at it. And so that brings me to reason number 7, information warfare and global narrative. Zelensky became the voice of a nation, speaking directly to the world through nightly addresses, often from bomb shelters or war rooms. I think this is the first time we've seen a war fought significantly from social media. Meanwhile, Ukraine's use of social media created a global awareness campaign unlike anything we've seen. Every destroyed tank, every rescue, every battlefield success was recorded, uploaded, and shared. Shane Gillis has a great bit, an absolutely great bit on how the entire Iraq and Afghanistan war, every single dude on both sides had GoPros on the whole time. And honestly, it kind of feels like that given how much footage we have. I think that's the future of war. I think we're going to be able to see a lot of it documented on the internet. Russia tried to control its narrative through censorship and propaganda, but few outside its borders bought the message. Even allies like China refused to openly support Russia's justifications for the war. Information control helped Ukraine shape international opinion, boost morale at home, and pressure governments abroad to keep sending aid. What do you think is more important? Do you think battlefield wins are important in this scenario specifically when a country is fighting for survival? Or is it the hearts and minds of millions watching? Ukraine has managed to do both fairly effectively. One of the defining features of the Russia-Ukraine war has been the explosive rise of drone warfare. While drones have been used in conflicts before, like in Syria, the scale, speed, and improvisation seen in Ukraine mark a turning point. This is the first modern war where both sides rely heavily on drones, not just for reconnaissance or airstrikes, but for everything. Artillery spotting, kamikaze missions, trench assaults, even electronic warfare. You can basically create a budget air force out of drone. And that is pretty much what Ukraine did. Ukraine crowdsourced production, setting up volunteer drone workshops, GoFundMe-style campaigns, and even high school competitions to design better drone systems. They converted $500 drones into deadly kamikaze platforms using simple grenades and custom detonation systems. Some Ukrainian units reportedly deploy over 30 drones for a single operation, many expendable but lethal. Russia initially lagged behind in drone innovation, relying mostly on Iranian-made drones. These were cheap and long-range, used primarily to overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses and swarm attacks against infrastructure. However, Ukraine adapted by deploying mobile AA teams and jamming systems, and by 2024, they were intercepting over 70% of these Iranian-made drones. Still, the psychological effect and economic cost of shooting down cheap drones with expensive missiles was not lost on either side. By 2025, both nations have effectively created parallel drone militaries. Ukraine's innovation led to the formation of full drone battalions under a unified drone assault forces command. These battalions are integrated into regular brigades and used for deep reconnaissance, decoy operations, and kamikaze strikes. Ukraine also employs AI-assisted software for targeting and swarm coordination, pushing battlefield automation further than most NATO countries have. Russia, in response, ramped up domestic drone production, including its Lancet series, more accurate and agile than Shaheeds. Lancets are now frequently used for hunting high-value targets like Ukrainian artillery or radars. Additionally, Russia has adopted trench drop drones and quadcopters similar to Ukraine's, mimicking many of their DIY tactics. As of mid-2025, drone warfare has fundamentally reshaped the battlefield. Traditional formations are harder to hide, trench positions are constantly watched. Artillery duels are decided by who has the better drone spotter. Even electronic warfare systems are evolving in real time to jam or spoof incoming drones. In short, this isn't just an air war, it's a war of adaptation. Whoever innovates faster in the drone domain gains a real-time tactical advantage. And in Ukraine, the skies are no longer ruled by air forces, they're ruled by programmers, hackers, and 3D printed fins. Let's wrap this up. Russia invaded Ukraine with tanks, missiles, and swagger, but over 3 years later, they've been beaten back by a country a third their size with fewer troops and no nuclear arsenal. Also, they lost ships to a country that doesn't have a navy. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. It means a lot to me. If you enjoyed these videos, please watch another one. I love making these. I love yelling at my camera for you. I am Mandatory Fun Day, and I'll see you next time.